So the holy man came to the church. The bishop and the prior yeased and laughing between themselves about certain fair dames, their words more befitting the lips of laymen, methinkens, than holy clerks. Then they dismounted, and the bishop, looking around, presently caught sight of Robin staying in the doorway. "Hillo, good fellow," quoth he in a jovial voice. "Who art thou that struttest in such gay feathers?" "A harper am I from the north country," quoth Robin, "and I can torch the strings, I vow, as never another man in all merry England can do." "Truly, good Lord Bishop, many a knight and burgher, clay and layman have danced to my music, willy-nilly and most times greatly against their will. Such is the magic of my harp. Now this day, my Lord Bishop, if I may play at this wedding, I do promise that I will cause the fair bride to laugh the man she marries with a laugh that shall last as long as the twain shall live together." "Ha, is it so?" cried the bishop. "Meanest thou this in sooth?" And he looked keenly at Robin, who gazed boldly back again into his eyes. "Now if thou wilt cause this maiden, who hath verily bewitched my poor cousin Stephen, thus to laugh the man she is to marry, as thou sayest thou canst, I will give thee whatever sum thou wilt ask me in due measures. Let me have a taste of thy skill, fellow." "Nay," quoth Robin, "my music cometh not without I choose, even at a lord bishop's bidding. I sooth, I will not play until the bride and bridegroom come. No, thou art a saucy velvet to speak so in my chest," quoth the bishop, frowning on Robin. "Yet I must need bear with thee. Look, prior, he there cometh our cousin Sir Stephen and his lady love." And now around the bend of the high road came another riding up on horses. The first of all was tall, the thin man, keenly bearing, dressed all in black silk, with a black velvet cap up on his head, turning up with scarlet. Robin looked and had no doubt that this was Sir Stephen, both because of his kingly carriage and of his grey hairs. Besides him rode a stout Saxon franklin, Ellen's father, Edward of Dreywold. Behind those two came a little borne by two horses, and herewith was a maiden whom Robin knew most be Ellen. Behind this lither rode 6 men-at-arms, the sunlight flashing on their steel caps as they came jingling up the dusty road. So these also came to the church, and there Sir Stephen leaped from his horse, and coming to the litter, handed fair Ellen out therefrom. Then Robin Hood looked at her, and could wonder no longer how it came about that so bright a knight as Sir Stephen of Trine thrusted to marry a common franklin's daughter, nor did he wonder that no ado was made about that matter, for she was the fairest maiden that ever he had beheld. Now, however, she was all pale and drooping, like a fair white lily snapped at the stern. And so, with bent head and sorrowful look, she went within the church, Sir Stephen leading her by the hand. "Why dost thou not play, fellow?" quoth the bishop, looking sternly at Robin. "Marry," said Robin calmly, "I will play in great wise than your lordship think, but not till the right time hath it come," said the bishop to himself, while he looked grimly at Robin. "When this wedding is gone by, I will have this fellow well whipped for his saucy tongue and bold speech." And now fair Ellen and Stephen stood before the altar, and bishop himself came in his robes and opened his book, wherein fair fair Ellen looked up and about her in bitter despair, like the fawn that finds the hours on her haunch. Then, in all his fluttering tanks and ribbons of red and yellow, Robin Hood strode forward. 3 steps he took from the pillar, whereby he leaned and stood between the bride and bridegroom. "Let me look up on this lass," he said in a loud voice. "Why, how now? What have we here? Here the lilies in the creeks, and not roses such as we find a bonny bride. This is no fitted wedding. Though, Sir Knight, so old and she so young, and thou thinkest to make her thy wife? I tell thee I may not be for thee, thou art not her own true love." At this all stood amazed, and knew not where to look, nor what to think or say, for they were all bewildered with happenings. So, while every one looked at Robin as though they had been changed to stone, he clapped his budgel horn to his lips and blew 3 blasts so loud and clear they echoed from floor to rafter as though they were sounded by the trump of doom. Then straightway Little John and Will Stutely came leaping and stood up on either side of Robin Hood, and quickly drew their broadswords, the while a mighty voice rolled over the heads of all. "Here be I, good master, when thou wantest me." For it was Friar Tuck that so called from the organ loft. And now all was hopping and noise. Stout Edward strode forward, ranging, and would have seized his daughter to drag her away, but Little John stepped between and thrust him back. "Stand back, old man," said he. "Thou art a hobbled horse this day." "Down with the villains!" cried Sir Stephen, and felled his sword, but it hung not beside him on this wedding day. Then the men-at-arms drew their swords, and it seemed like that blood would wet the stones, but suddenly came a bustle at the door, and loud voices, steel flashing in the light, and the clash of blows sounded. The men-at-arms fell back, and up the aisle came leaping 18 stout yeomen, all clothed in Lincoln green, with Eleanor Dale at their head. In his hand he bore Robin Hood's good stout trusty bow in yew, and this he gave to him, kneeling to the while up on one knee. Then up spake Edward of their word, in a deep voice of anger. "It is thou, Eleanor Dale, that hast bred all this coil in a church?" "Nay," quoth merry Robin, "that have I done, and I care not who knew of it, for my name is Robin Hood." At this a sudden silence fell. The prior of Elmet and those that belonged to him gathered together like a flock of frightened sheep, when a scent of the wolf is nigh, while the Bishop of Hereford, laying aside his book, crossed himself devoutly. "Now heaven keep us this day," he said, "from that evil man." "Nay," quoth Robin, "I mean you no harm, but here is fair Ellen's betrothed husband, and she shall marry him, or pain will be bred to some of you." Then up spake stout Edward in a loud and angry voice. "Now I say nay, I am her father, and she shall marry Sir Stephen and no other." Now all this time, while everything was in tumult about him, Sir Stephen had been standing in proud and scornful silence. "Nay, fellows," said he proudly, "thou mayst take thy daughter back again. I would not marry her after this day's doing, could I gain all merry England thereby. I tell thee plainly, I love thy daughter, old as I am, and would have taken her up like a jewel from this day. Yet truly I know not that she did love this fellow, and was beloved by him. Maiden, if thou dost rather choose a beggarly minstrel than a high-born knight, take thy choice. I do feel in it shame that I should thus such talking amid this herd, and so I will leave you. Thus saying, he turned and gathered his men about him, walked proudly down the aisle. Then all the yeomen were silent by the scorn of his words. Old Friar Tuck leaned over the edge of the choir's loft and called out to him ere he had gone. Good Dean, Sir Knight, though what is old bones must alway make room for young blood. Sir Stephen neither answered nor looked up, but passed out from the church as though he had heard naught, his men following him. Then the bishop of Hereford spoke hastily. I too have no business here, and so I will depart. And he made as though he would go. But Robin Hood laid hold upon his clothes and held him. Stay, my lord, said he. I have yet something to say to thee. The bishop's face fell, but he stayed as Robin bade him, for he saw he could not go. Then Robin Hood turned to stout Edward of their world, and said he, Give thy blessing on thy daughter's marriage to this yeoman, and I will be well. Little John, give me the bags of gold. Look, farmer, here are 200 bright golden angels. Give thy blessing, as I say, and I will count them out to thee as thy daughter's dower. Give not thy blessing, and she shall be married all the same, but not so much as a cracked farthing shall cross thy palm. Choose. Then Edward looked up on the ground with bent bows, turning the matter over and over in his mind. But he was a steward man, and one, withal, that made the best use of a cracking pipkin. So at last he looked up and said, but in a joyous tone, If a wretch will go her own glade, let her go. I have thought to make a lady of her, but if she chooses to be what she is like to be, I have naught to do with her henceforth. Nevertheless, I will give her my blessing when she is duly wedded. It may not be, spake up one of those of Emmet. The banners have not been duly published. Neither is there any priest here to marry them. How sayest thou? Roared Tuck from the choir loft. No priest? Mary, here standest as a holy man as thou art. Any day of the week a clarion orders I would have thee known. As for the question of banners, strum me not over the straw, brother, for I will publish them. So saying, he called the banners, and says the old ballad, least 3 times should not be enough. He published them 9 times or e. Then straightway he came down from the loft, and forthwith performed the marriage service, and so Ellen and Eleanor were duly wedded. And now Robin counted out 200 golden angels to Edward of their world, and he, upon his part, gave his blessing, yet not, I vow, as though he meant it with overmuch goodwill. Then the stout yeoman climbed around and grasped Ellen's palm, and he, holding Ellen's hand within his own, looked about him all dizzy with his happiness. Then at least jolly Robin turned to the Bishop of Hereford, who had been looking on at all the past with a grim look. My lord Bishop, quoth he, thou mayst bring to thy mind that thou didst promise me that I did play in such a wise as to cause this fair lass to love her husband. Thou wouldst give me whatsoever I ask in reason. I have played my play, and she loved her husband, which she would not have done but for me. So now fulfil thy promise. Thou hast upon thee that which, methinketh, thou wouldest be the better without it. Therefore, I pray thee, give me that golden chain that hangeth about thy neck, as a wedding present for the fair bride. then the bishop. Cheeks grew red with rage and his eyes flashed. He looked at Robin with a fell look, but saw that in the yeoman's face which bade him pause. Then slowly he took the chain from around his neck and handed it to Robin, who flung it over Ellen's head so that it hung glittering about her shoulders. Then said merry Robin, I take thee on the bride's part for thy husband's gift, and truly thou thyself art more seemling without it. Now, shouldest thou ever come nigh to Sherwood, I much hope that I shall give thee there such a feast as thou hadst never in all thy life before. May heavens forfend, cried the bishop earnestly, for he knew right well what manner at feast it was that Robin Hood gave his guests in Sherwood Forest. But now Robin Hood gathered his men together, and with Ellen and his young bride in their midst, they all turned their footsteps towards the woodlands. On the way thither, Friar Tuck came close to Robin and plucked him by the sleeves. Thou dost lead a merry life, good master, quoth he, but dost thou not think that it would be for the welfare of all your souls to have a good stout chaplain, such as I, to oversee holy matters? Truly I do love this life mightily. At this Robin Hood laughed amin, and bade him stay and come one of the band if he wished to. That night there was such a feast held in the greenwood at Nottinghamshire, never saw before. To that feast you and I were not bidden, and pity it is that we were not. So lest we should both feel the matter the more keenly, I will say no more about it.